we can all agree that advancement in medical knowledge has been a good thing for humanity. We no longer die from a simple cut because we have antibiotics. We can undergo dramatic surgeries with the help of anesthesia. We manage to eradicate many diseases with the use of vaccines. But like most things, you can have too much of a good thing. In this video, we're looking at the harmful effects medical knowledge has on how we die. Please like and share if you find this video informative. Now let's talk the over-medicalisation of death. Dying and the over-medicalisation of death is the area of the death field that I have the most passion for. But it seems to be the part that people don't want to hear about. Funerals and body disposal methods are spoken about a lot, and they are no doubt important issues. But I find the death positive community often still avoids the issue of actual dying, which seems a bit odd, unproductive perhaps. Less death positive, more post-death positive. Is it because of death anxiety or a denial? Is it because they feel body disposal options can be changed but the way we die can't? Whatever the reason, you should be concerned and fighting hard against it for change, if not harder than body disposal issues. Because that is the issue you will be alive for. That is the area of change that you will be around to benefit from. Because dying nowadays isn't immediate. It is slow, often painful, and more concerning, out of your control and in the hands of medical professionals determined to keep you alive against all odds, no matter if you want it or not. Death nowadays is seen as a failure of the medical industry rather than a natural event. Defining over-medicalisation of death. The American Medical Association's Journal of Ethics published an article in 2018 about this very topic, and a link is in the description. It states, before antibiotics, CPR, and life-sustaining technologies, humans had little choice about the timing and manner of their deaths. Today, the medicalisation of death has enabled patients to delay death, prolonging their living and dying. New technologies, the influence of the media, and medical professionals themselves have together transformed dying from a natural part of the human experience into a medical crisis. Today, our societal avoidance of death has led in part to medicalised dying, by which we mean a dying process facilitated or prolonged by medical intervention. Dying has been removed from the home and community and transplanted into hospital and institution in an attempt to rescue the dying patient from death. Medicalisation can violate the body of the dying patients with tubes, restraints, medical hums and beeps, all in efforts to control what remains of life and to starve off death as long as possible. It has enabled patients, their families and physicians to delay death without necessarily promoting the health and healing of the patients. So in essence, they will keep you breathing and your heart beating as long as possible. You're not living in any other way apart from those two basic criteria, but any life is apparently better than death. So how the hell do we get here? Medical training. Firstly, if you haven't read this book, and I'm sure you've seen it on shelves in your local bookstores and libraries because it's everywhere, I would really strongly recommend you give it a read. It does look at the dying of the elderly mostly, but it gives a very good look into how doctors are trained to think about death. Essentially, for the medical community, death is a failure. Your job as a doctor is to save people, to cure and treat people. So if someone dies, you failed. Now, it's very easy to say, oh, they know that's not true. But they have just gone through almost a decade's worth of training to save lives. And naturally, that's going to skew your view on how you see death. We can't say that they're brainwashed in any way, but it is certainly conditioning. When you are being trained to be an elite athlete, you are being trained to win. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you know that for someone to win, someone has to lose. But that's not where your head is at, because it's been drilled into you that you are competing to win. You are not competing to lose. A doctor is treating a patient to live. That is the only acceptable, successful option. Now in the future, we will go into the history of all this, but this video was just to get you acquainted with the problematic concept of death being seen as a medical issue, something that can be treated. Now I know people will hear that and cry, you just want all the old sick people to die, not treat them and save them. So let me clarify. I am not saying that if someone is in a car accident, a medical team should not try and save them. I am not saying that if someone is in their 80s and breaks their hip, we should leave them on the kitchen floor and wait for them to die. I am not saying a child with a heart defect shouldn't be given a heart transplant. What we are talking about here is, for example, someone in their 80s in extremely poor health who can't get out of bed, who has had enough, being kept alive through painful surgeries and treatments, feeding tubes, when their heart crashes, giving them CPR multiple times, causing broken ribs, being forced to take medication to keep them alive that makes them sick, all because any life is better than no life. We are talking about younger people diagnosed with aggressive diseases who are given 6 months to live, and instead of giving them palliative care to ensure that 6 months is as comfortable as possible as the patient wants, having doctors manipulate them into trying just one more aggressive treatment, just one more, maybe one more, and making their last 6 months miserable and they still die. This happens every day in countries around the world. Because according to the medical profession, the media, and often families, any life is better than no life. The idea of being made as comfortable as possible and enjoying what you can in your last few weeks isn't an acceptable use of medical treatment for many in the medical community, and that's the issue. When it comes to the psychology of why doctors do this, it comes down to identity. Identity in the individual doctor and identity in the medical field. I'll explain. If you ask a kid what is the job of a doctor, they will likely say something along the lines of saving people's lives. And as people get older, they may not have such a simplistic view of what a doctor is, but they still see the doctor as a medical authority on treating people and making people better. So when a kid in high school says, "I'm going to be a doctor," all that time and effort goes into studying and training to be that medical authority that saves lives. But remember, the human brain doesn't really stop developing until around the age of 25. And teenagers and young adults naturally go through a period of, who am I? What is my identity? And this is where you see teens throwing themselves headfirst into things like the Gothic subculture or social issues or whatever. And it becomes an all or nothing as they try to prove to the outside world that that is their identity. And I'm sure you've come across at least one person in your life who has found feminism and gone to the extreme, or found religion and gone to the extreme, and the list goes on and on. This is because they are insecure in their identity. People who are secure in their identity don't feel the need to constantly prove it to others. So remember, these students training to be doctors are in this young adult identity crisis themselves when they go into training for many years that tell them all about saving lives and nothing about dying well. So now you have a young adult in a competitive field with all that insecurity, feeling they must prove how good they are and live up to the expectations of those around them and keep every single patient alive. All or nothing, remember. And I mention this because when people think of doctors, they forget that a massive chunk of time of them being a doctor wasn't in the completely developmentally adult stage of life. And they are human, and insecurity and the lengths someone will go to prove themselves is also a big part of that. But like we said earlier, it's not just the individual doctor's identity that causes issues here. It's also the identity of the medical field itself. And it could very well be said that the medical field is in its insecure young adult years. Because we have come so far. We have so many treatments and technologies and gadgets and medicines, and the field wants to use them all and not in moderation. It still feels like it needs to prove itself, that it can overcome everything that's thrown at it. Which is why the over-medicalisation of death is not a medical professional problem, it's a human problem. We as a species feel that we can conquer all. We send people into space, we make the natural world do what we want to do, we overcome architectural obstacles, we created the internet out of nothing. So the idea that we can't control death and make it break to our will is seen as a failure. No matter how many great medical things we've managed to achieve, it's not enough if we can't conquer that. The public and the media. Now, we've looked at the psychology around doctors and the issue, but we can't put all the blame on them. No. So let's talk about the public and the media's hand in all of this. Whether it be on TV, movies, the news, we always hear about the remarkable tales of survival, how medicine fought against the odds and won. Then we have TV shows like Grey's Anatomy repeatedly showing patients with massive trauma, almost bled out and missing half their insides, and they miraculously survive and walk out of hospital in a couple of days. People have come to believe that doctors can solve anything that's thrown at them. Doctors will save you from any situation. And they either don't have the critical thinking skills or are in denial that that's not always true. And when a doctor doesn't manage to save someone despite trying absolutely everything, suddenly it's their fault. This belief of doctors can save anyone was particularly prominent in the video we did a while back titled The Horrific Death of Hisashi Aochi, who was kept alive despite everyone knowing he was going to die from his injuries. His family believed the medical field could cure anything, apparently even the fact that he'd been cooked, and refused to believe medical staff when they repeatedly told them that nothing could be done. It is the same reasoning why so many families refuse to turn off life support on their brain-dead loved one. And we look at that in depth in our Defining Brain Death video. Heads up, it doesn't mean you're in a coma. And the sad part about these kind of cases is that people often go on to sue these doctors for not magically saving the patient, and then the media gets hold of it and suddenly they're labelled as the doctor who lost a patient. And that can have horrible consequences on one's career and reputation. So don't believe everything you see on TV. Doctors can't save everyone. CPR doesn't make a difference most of the time, and detectives can't solve every crime, and certainly not within a couple of days. Okay, that last part doesn't have anything to do with this, but it's really just a pet peeve of mine. We have come a long way with medicine. We can treat many things, but we can't always cure them. And I'll give HIV as an example. For the longest time, we had nothing that could help, and it would just get worse and worse, turn into AIDS, and the person would have a horrible death. Nowadays, we have excellent medication to treat HIV, and if you're taking the medication, you will live just as long and happy as the rest of us. But that's the thing, it's treatable, not curable. You don't take the meds and end up cured, the HIV is destroyed and goes away. No, you take the medication to treat it, to treat the symptoms. Similarly, you can't cure death. Human beings are meant to die. That's just a biological fact. We can treat symptoms of ill health that make it hard to live and less enjoyable, but you will still die. There's no way out of that, no matter how much the cryonics crowd protest. Like, seriously, there's some sort of unhinged cult, and I had to block a bunch of them out of my emails and then turn off the comments on that video if you're wondering why we had to turn the comments off. In this video, we have taken a good look at the psychology behind the over-medicalisation of death. And in case you were wondering why we chose to focus on that angle, it's so you know what you're up against. If you could understand why something is happening, you can take steps and make plans to avoid it from happening to you and your loved ones. And we will look at that further in another video. But the point is, when it comes to illness, sure, do what you can to help the patient get better. But when you know there is nothing else that can be done to treat them, nothing else that will make a positive difference, stop. Stop poking and prodding at them. Stop giving them invasive treatments. Stop medication that's not working. Just stop. Don't make every last moment of their life one of trauma, especially when they're saying enough. Give them pain meds, maybe anti-nausea tablet. Make them comfortable. Just let them be. That is not a failure. We have done videos on terminal illness diagnosis and having a good death if you'd like to go back and watch them. Links will be in the description. We will be doing more videos on dying itself going forward, no matter what the limited views are and whether YouTube likes it or not, because it is important and, quite frankly, at least I've tried. Let us know in the comments what particular angle you want covered. And with that, go talk death.